Throughout history, the use of boarding parties to defeat enemy vessels was a key element of naval warfare. By the mid-19th century, improvements in weapons technology had made such endeavours near suicidal. One of the last known examples of the US Navy being involved in such an incident occurred during World War II. This is the curious case of the USS Buckley. The USS Buckley was the lead ship in her class, a design of destroyer that was planned and constructed in the wake of the Japanese entry into World War II. The Buckley-class destroyers were christened in honour of an airman named John D. Buckley, who'd been killed during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. With a complement of 186 crew and possessing a range of 5,500 nautical miles, nearly 150 of these ships would go on to be built by the US Navy. Finally completed and launched in April of 1943, the Buckley spent her early years working up off the eastern seaboard before being deployed to a hunter-killer task group a year later. And it was part of this unit that she would go on to become the subject of nautical legend when she encountered an enemy vessel in the early hours of May 6, 1944, in the eastern Atlantic Ocean. Long before the US entry into World War II, the U-66 was one of nearly 200 Type 9 submarines to be constructed by the German Navy. Having been completed and launched in January of 1941, she would go on to complete 8 wartime patrols, claiming 33 kills and sinking over 200,000 tons of enemy shipping. At the time of her 9th patrol, in January of 1944, she was under the command of her 4th executive officer, Oberleutnant Jose Gerhard Seehausen. During the course of this sortie into the Atlantic, the submarine claimed a further 4 targets, before then making to rendezvous with a resupply submarine. But unbeknownst to the captain and his crew, the supply sub had already been sunk, and her position had been betrayed to the US task force, of which the Buckley was a part. On May 1st, elements of Task Force 21 detected U-66 on their radar screens and initiated a series of attacks. These included depth charges dropped from the various ships that were attached to the group, as well as torpedo attacks from aircraft belonging to the carrier USS Block Island. The submarine experienced at least 3 near misses as a result of these attacks, before running silent and deep in an attempt to lose its hunters. 4 days later, running low on both fuel and fresh air, U-66 surfaced in the early hours, still hopeful that her resupply submarine was somewhere in the vicinity. When an unknown craft later emerged from the nearby darkness, the lookouts on the submarine fired recognition flares, only to realise at the last second it was an enemy destroyer. Aboard the approaching USS Buckley, Commander Brent Abel ordered his men to hold their fire, in the hopes of surprising the enemy submarine. But the ruse did not completely work, and when the destroyer was 4,000 yards away, U-66 let loose with a single torpedo before veering away. When this torpedo missed, both ships began to slowly circle one another, firing with their deck guns. The conning tower of the submarine was shredded by the Buckley's 3-inch gun, prompting the German commander to fire off another torpedo in a desperate attempt to escape. When this was again unsuccessful, Abel decided to end the battle, ordering his helmsman to ram the beleaguered submarine. Moments later, the Buckley struck the foredeck of the wallowing German sub, temporarily locking the 2 craft against one another. Almost immediately, German submariners poured out of the conning tower, some attempting to surrender, while still others swarmed up the side of the destroyer. Up on the bridge, Commander Abel watched as a series of fist and knife fights broke out below him on the deck of his ship. This prompted him to issue an order, not given by a US commander for over a century before, to repel all boarders. Grabbing whatever was to hand, American sailors hurled themselves at their German attackers. Some carried tools or empty shell casings. Witnesses report that at least one sailor was brandishing a coffee pot, whilst another was seen to hurl his mug into the face of a nearby submariner. Under a wave of violence, the German boarders were forced off the deck of the Buckley and back down onto their submarine, Seconds later, a sailor from the Buckley hurled a hand grenade down the exposed conning tower below, setting off an internal fire that eventually sent the submarine down underneath the water. Of the U-66 crew, 36 were saved, with Commander Seehausen amongst those who went down with his submarine. Most tragically of all, 2 of the 24 dead were later revealed to be British prisoners who had been transferred onto the submarine after it had previously sunk their ship during its patrol. Commander Abel was awarded the Navy Cross for his actions during this encounter, and the Buckley would go on to complete a further 2 escort duties, sinking another U-boat before the end of the war. Whilst this may not be the last time that a ship's captain would ever issue the order to repel boarders, it certainly appears to be the last to be documented in any official records. A quirk of both fate and history upon one of the most chaotic and uncertain battlefields of the Second World War.